Hi everyone, welcome to Search Sessions. Thank you for joining us today. Search Sessions is a bi-weekly show that we host during the pandemic, helping businesses and our community best position themselves for success during and after the pandemic is over. We do this every other Wednesday at 11 a.m. Mountain, and we bring on industry leaders and experts, thought leaders to provide business advice and guidance during these crazy times. And this week we have a fantastic show for you from our SEO Boostability experts. They're going to be talking about the number one factor to get you ranking on Google. It's one of our top questions we get here at Boostability, so we're excited to give you this presentation. We have our Director of SEO, Colton Miller, so thanks for joining us, Colton.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. And we have Mike Marsh, our SEO Manager. Thank you, Mike.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for having me as well, Christine. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, so they worked really hard to put these strategies together for you to implement on your website. And I am Christine Pratt, our head of content here at Boostability and your host for today's show. So we're going to get started with today's agenda to get going. Let's see. Multitasking today. There we go. So in today's agenda, we'll start with the introductions so you can get to know Mike and Colton a little more. And then we'll go over Boostability as kind of a case study and show you the power of SEO. So, the strategies that we've implemented on our own are the ones that we're sharing with you that you can implement on your website. And then we're going to go into all the different factors that get you ranking on Google. And then we will count down to the number one factor to rank high on Google. And then, of course, as always, we'll have a live Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions, drop them into the Q&A platform here or also into the chat. I will be monitoring both throughout the show. And then tune in the week after next on September 14th, where we'll talk about the top 2 sales strategies that every business needs to know, and then taking your prospects from seeds to sales. So that's going to be a great show, and we'll have that registration link for you at the end. So to give you a little bit of background on Boostability, we are the global leader in small business and partner-focused white label SEO. We offer affordable SEO specifically designed to meet the needs of small businesses and medium-sized businesses. We use a proprietary technology platform called Launchpad, and it tracks over 2.3 million keywords every month, which enables us to make informed SEO decisions based on these millions of bits of information. And not only that, but we serve customers and partners around the world. We're in 15 different countries, 9 languages, and we're quickly expanding. And we get 86% of our customers on the first page of Google within 6 months. And that's 69,000 plus keywords on page 1 of Google in just 2019. So Boostability is definitely dedicated to helping the small business succeed online. So now I want to introduce Mike and Colton to you. Like I said, they're our resident SEO experts. Colton has worked in SEO since 2007, doing everything in the industry, basically from sales and customer service, fulfillment, and now he's into the enterprise strategy. He's become an industry leader and speaks regularly on podcasts, webinars, and conferences focusing on organic search strategy. And Mike, he's worked at Boostability now for 6 years. He is currently our SEO manager on the marketing team and has 8 years of digital marketing experience and has dealt with a variety of clients ranging from plumbers and locksmiths and D1 universities. So he's seen the entire range. And he's in charge of Boostability's organic lead channel and SEO strategy implementation. So enough with that. Let's get into the good stuff of why you are all here. We're going to be learning about the number one thing to get rank on Google and strategies that you can implement to make your site irresistible to search engines. So Mike and Colton, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine, and thanks for having us on Search Sessions. We're so glad to be here today. Today we want to dive into what we consider to be the most important aspect of any SEO campaign and really the driving force behind ranking on Google's search engine. Today, we're going to explore how to make your website invaluable to search engines, like you mentioned, and users alike. So let's get into it. To get started, we want to express that what we're going to share with you today is not just a fly by the seat of our pants nonsense. What we're going to share with you actually works. And we know that it works because we've actually applied it here at Boostability. We've overhauled our own strategy and implemented a new strategy with really growth in mind. We wanted to improve not only our branding and online presence, but our content and website as well. We wanted to do this in a myriad of ways. And in order to do that, we we needed to really reevaluate what our focus was and pivot towards our goal of really increasing metrics along these lines. Very similar to the businesses that we service, we're in the same boat as well. But we know that this works because we've seen it work. This goal really that we had of improving many of these things that we're all in together, in the different search engines that we're looking for as far as the ranking factors, these can include things like the time on page, the page views, the high intent keywords, article quality. We wanted to improve all of this so we could increase our organic traffic. The reason why we wanted to do that really was because that equals organic leads. And if we're doing SEO, we want to increase organic traffic, we want to increase organic leads, because in 2019, we at Boostability, we really revamped this whole process. The content marketing team began a new and improved implementation of the one main strategy that we're going to be talking about today to get results that we're seeing today. So here are some examples of these results. With an increase in organic leads of 67% in 2020, we've seen a big increase. And so it's something that we know works, like I mentioned. We've also increased our blog user metrics like sessions and page views from Q1 to Q2 here in this year. And our strategy is definitely paying off.
Yeah, and Mike, I just want to point out, like, these didn't just happen overnight. There was a lot of work that we all, you, me, Colton, we all worked on to make this happen.
Yeah, it's, and we always tell our clients, like, a good SEO campaign takes off around 6 months. Stick with us for that long. Like, that's how long it takes to start ranking well and to see those kind of growth metrics happen. And it was like right on 6 months after being done, boom, we saw all of this increase, and we're like, yes, we knew it. This is awesome. This really confirms a lot of those philosophies that we've been preaching for a long time and that we've seen. And so we knew that it was definitely going to work. We didn't have a doubt in our mind.
Yeah.
The rise, we want to go over a few more statistics, but this rise in statistics that we've seen goes to show how SEO really works, right? And when you do SEO right, it really, really works. And that's the power of SEO. That's why we've named this slide the power of SEO. We're seeing increases on time on page, and we implemented different strategies like a renewed keyword research effort and internal linking structure that helped bring attention to our content. We've also made sure that every piece of content that we put out is syndicated to our newsletter and social media channels as part of our overall strategy. And using these other strategies, the more that we tell you about today, we've seen dramatic increases all across our website. We've achieved this success through the one main, again, the number one factor to rank on Google. We've achieved this success with that. But the question that some of you may be asking is, so what? You can increase all these different things. Like I mentioned, you can increase the time on page, you can increase this, but that's not going to move my revenue needle, right? To that, I would say that you're right. But if you remember, we also increased our organic leads. So what we were doing, we had that goal of not only increasing those metrics, but we wanted to capture more qualified leads, right? So now I'll turn over to Colton.
Absolutely. So qualified leads is the biggest thing, right? Everybody needs leads. There's multiple ways to get these, leads essentially in the door. It could be things like paid, right? You could be doing PPC. You could be doing a big social media campaign, and you may have done that historically, right? I know a lot of kind of e-commerce businesses, they typically start on social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, whether it's, Instagram, different things like that. But it could also be cold calling, right? It could be picking up a phone book, trying to outbound get those leads. Realistically, though, it really comes down to one source that you primarily need to focus on, and that's going to be your organic lead source. First off, it's going to help you capture brand traffic. It's going to be really kind of innovative and needed for the long-term success of your business is the organic. It definitely is one that Mike's kind of alluded to already. It takes some time to get there, and so moving on to our next slide here. Essentially, while you can do paid and some of those things to kind of boost your SEO efforts, or sorry, boost your lead efforts, it's one of those things where it's kind of a rented source. It's not something that is going to be continual unless you're pouring money into it. Where, on the other side of things, on the SEO side, while you're just building your business naturally, you could be kind of growing your SEO channel and your search channel and gaining leads naturally over time. And so because of that, SEO is probably the number one thing that we would, say focus on. And obviously we're doing that ourselves, and we're seeing fantastic success for it. There's kind of one underlying, fact when it comes to leads, and particularly SEO leads, that is probably the main, driver for us and hopefully you as well. And that is, just to be frank, SEO search leads. Those are leads that have the highest conversion rate out of any lead source out there on the market today. Whether you're doing PPC, whether you're doing social, all of those tend to have a little bit more of a sales process. You have to, resolve concerns, different things like that. But if you have somebody coming to your website who is actively looking for information, actively looking for your service, usually they're kind of getting over those concerns, or they've addressed those in their own way, and they're just kind of looking for somebody to fulfill on something.
Yeah,
Pricing might be.
Colton, I think it's also good to point out that we have, usually if you marry a PPC strategy and an organic strategy, that's kind of where you're maximizing your search reach also.
Yeah. One thing that we always stress here, especially to kind of our small business here, is you definitely have to supplement that kind of runway, right? If you're just starting out, SEO is not going to be working unless somebody is actively looking for your brand or business. And in some cases, that may not be enough. And so absolutely supplementing that with, some sort of baseline of kind of paid search is going to be helpful to, give you those initial leads while your SEO is growing. And over time, hopefully, you might be spending a lot on PPC, not a whole lot on SEO. And as time goes, you can kind of rotate some of that spend over. And hopefully, if everything's going immaculately well, ideally, both of those channels actually grow. So you just kind of keep growing across the board. But in the case that you have to kind of trade one for the other, the hope is that over time you kind of supplement it out with SEO. So that way, even when you're done kind of spending, or if you're in a transition period, or even focusing somewhere else business-wise, you're still getting the kind of perpetual profitability that is SEO.
And I love that you mentioned that using all of these channels in conjunction with each other, they really can build off each other. I just saw a question recently in the chat where it said, what does PPC mean? And that's paid per click. That's essentially, it's the Google AdWords. PPC is the term that they're using there specifically, where that's essentially you're paying money for these specific terms. It's the ads that you'll see on the SERP. Just to give a little context there when we're referring to organic traffic, PPC traffic, and then all those other channels that we've mentioned. And then to really go into this, like we mentioned, organic leads, at least as many digital marketers will tell you that they are some of the best leads to land, because like you mentioned, Colton, they're qualified in the process. It's through keyword research, through intent and search intent. You've already qualified a lot of those organic leads, so they convert the highest because they're the closest to buying in a lot of instances. So you've already done that legwork. You've really qualified the traffic beforehand in all this process. But the question arises, okay, what gets that? Like, how do you get those organic leads? How do you get that organic traffic? And that's through the power of SEO and the #1 factor to rank on Google. But what is it? If you go to different SEO companies, they'll tell you a lot of different things, and a lot of different, at least in my experience with working with different companies, is they'll focus on perhaps one thing. They'll look at all of the relevant keywords, the good content, the mobile friendliness, all of these other ranking signals that they potentially will look at, and they may deem them important in a different order, depending on their experience and their data and who they're working with. But what we want to do is we want to really look into these signals, because they're all very important signals that Google does look at. But one really stands out above the rest. And before we go into detail on that, we want to talk about some of the runner-ups, some of the really they're important enough that we shouldn't ignore them, but it leads us and it kind of builds us up into what is the number one factor on Google. So that begs the question, what about number 2 through 5? So what about them?
Yeah, these are great. I mean, all those factors are very important, and we'll probably cover those on other search sessions in the future. Definitely, we've covered some of them in the past, but we want to boil down to a couple that we find are the most important and that have really helped with our SEO strategy. So let's go through 2 through 5, and then we'll dive into number 1 here in just a little bit. So here's number 5.
So kicking us off, right? Strategy. That's my day-to-day. It's something I love. At the end of the day, it really boils down to essentially, keyword strategy mixed with page strategy, mixed with kind of overall site strategy in a nutshell. But overall, it really comes down to you want to be topically focused. You want your content to be reflective of that. You want to make sure that you have your own tone, your own voice. The one thing that I always recommend, especially if you're a plumber, you don't write, that's not necessarily your job. But it now partially is, especially if you're being the one to kind of grow and make your website. And in that instance, I would say don't shy away from your voice, your tone, the way you actually say things. You'd be surprised how unique you actually are when it comes to kind of describing something that somebody else has. And so when it comes to services and making sure that you're kind of varying yourself, use your own tone, use your own voice. And, before you get started, make sure that you're focusing on the right keywords. Keywords predominantly, we all think about kind of the big money makers or the ones that we feel are big money makers because they tend to have a lot of search volume and they tend to be the broadest. But if we take the example of a plumber, you may not necessarily want to focus on plumber because there's a lot of connotation. There's a lot of different intents behind that, and it predominantly has a lot of search, but that's potentially a lot of people that are not sure what they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for somebody to specialize in something making. Maybe they're looking for a price quote. Maybe they're actually looking for a career in being a plumber in an area. So there are some of those things that you kind of have to kind of get over. And you can get over some of those things by, for instance, picking long tail keywords that have a little bit more specificity. They have a little bit more of an intent behind them. Somebody searching for, emergency plumber, installation or bathtub installation, something like that. They very clearly have something in mind that they're looking for. And at that point, they're probably just looking for somebody to buy from or somebody to potentially call and get a quote from, right? And that puts your name in the bid to potentially get the job. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you got to go after keywords, but it's the right keywords. You never want to kind of lose sight of the short tail, those kind of broad keywords, but you want to make sure that you are specifically focusing and targeting those long tail keywords. And in some cases, just to be frank and fair, especially in the local atmosphere, sometimes those don't exist in tools. And so it may be something that you kind of have to apply your own thought, or maybe even ask your customer base, how did you find me? What did you actually search for? If you're getting a lot of kind of oddball services coming through, those are opportunities for you to potentially use those as keywords. And then again, taking keywords, once we kind of have a good idea of keywords or those kind of base intent keywords, we can start matching those to pages. Is it something that maybe you can cluster things together? Again, if you have a lot of oddball coming from, let's say, a bathroom, maybe you need to structure your site that you're talking about bathroom and then some of the services that you can offer within that particular place. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you have, kitchen. Maybe it's new construction. There's a lot of different ways that you could potentially structure that content, and ideally you need to structure it for your customer base or even who you want your customer base to be. It's happened a few times. I see this quite often with like mechanics or even machine shops, somewhere where you want to specialize. I only do diesel. I only do a certain type of vehicle. And those are fantastic, but you have to put that out there. Just saying I'm an auto mechanic and then, I want to, get everybody in the door. That's not the best. First off, you're going to get burnt out if you're getting too many people asking just kind of either the same question or questions that you're just getting tired of. But then it also kind of lets your customer down. They may say, well, you don't want to go there because they don't do any of that. You don't want that. So instead, again, within the search environment, you want to make sure that you're putting out there what you actually want to do, who you want to service, and have them come to you. Have them come in the door because that's what they're potentially looking for.
So question on that. If, someone, if they are a plumber, we'll keep going with this example.
Mm-hmm.
If they are someone that can repair sinks or pipes or toilets or, all of the above, maybe even they do new construction, is it important to start targeting a couple specific keywords and then some of the others will follow? Or how would you recommend, maybe picking the right keyword to even get started in this?
Sure. Move on to the next slide here. And I think this is where I like to start. This is where our teams start when we're recommending keywords to any of our customers. But it really comes down to intent. And intent is something that you largely have to decide kind of on your own and use your own kind of logic with it. But search engines are actually pretty good at understanding intent, and they're actually really good at telling you how they understand a query. And so intent means essentially what is the action somebody wants to take, right? Again, if somebody is looking for something broad, they may have more of a reliance on, hey, I'm looking for information, I'm looking to learn. They may want to research, right? Maybe they're doing a comparison of a few different companies. Or, and this is hopefully what we're all striving for, right? Maybe they're getting somebody who is actually looking for a service, looking for a product, and they're looking to buy. So the number one thing that we rely on, obviously, is this intent, but we do this a little bit more factually versus just relying on somebody's notion of what they feel an intent is. We actually match that with search results. So once you kind of have a cluster or even a few keywords that you're potentially looking at, look at the search results. Do those searches yourself and find out what Google is recommending, because there's a really good chance if you think that, hey, this is actually a really high buying term, but then you do a Google search and you're finding nothing but YouTube videos and articles and just kind of educational material, that is a very telltale sign that despite what you think, Google themselves, with all of their data and kind of algorithms, they're finding that people predominantly are actually looking for education. They're not looking for your particular service. On the flip end, if you do a search and all of a sudden you have either some competitors that you're aware of locally, or even people that are just matching your service to a loose extent, maybe you have some competitors that are more national, different things like that, that's where all of a sudden you can say, oh, that keyword is actually a good keyword because it has people that are, predominantly what I am, they're there. And so that kind of validates that that keyword is probably a good keyword for you, and it's a good keyword for you to focus on for Google. That's one thing that, if I can kind of educate anybody regarding keywords, it's you never want to force your intent, because you're not going to be able to. You have to go with what kind of Google is understanding, and while that will evolve over time, there's a really high chance that the way they understand a keyword today is the way that they're going to understand it 6 months, a year from now. And so trying to force yourself, brute force yourself into a keyword, it's not the best strategy. Instead, take the river, if you will, take the path of least resistance, and go with the keywords that Google understands fit your intent. So number one kind of factor to pick a keyword, intent. Find those keywords that your customers are looking for that match exactly what you're offering, and you will be selling things all day, and you won't even have that much difficulty actually selling people, because they're actually looking for your service. They're actually coming to you with a need that you actually satisfy, versus, hey, I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for. Maybe you could coach me through for the next 4 hours and we can figure out exactly what I want. Leave that up to them. Leave that up to another business who's not doing their business correctly and their SEO efforts right. Take the benefit of, once I understand what I'm looking for, now I'm looking for you.
Yeah, and do you have any tools, or there's a bunch of tools out there on the internet, like you can use some Google tools for keyword research, or there's a little bit more technical ones like Ahrefs, but if you're just getting started, you really don't know kind of where to start. Is there a good tool or a good method to kind of pick a good keyword?
Yeah, right off the top of my head, your head. Just to be frank, those are going to be the best keywords that typically you'll come up with that may not have enough data to kind of filter up inside of a tool. But use your head. Essentially, how are people looking for it? How would you look for it? If you're not really sure, ask somebody who may not be familiar with the industry. How would you actually look for this service? Outside of that, just to give you some specific tools, Google AdWords, so they call it their keyword planner, specifically for AdWords or PPC. It's a free tool. You may have to put a credit card in just to kind of validate that you're not spamming their tools, stuff like that. But go in, it's free. You can do a few searches. If your website's already built, you can actually put your website in and they'll try to figure out what keywords might fit well. And I wouldn't use those kind of wholesale. Again, I would use that to kind of come up with a list of keywords and then validate that list off of actual searches. Spend the time, spend a day. You'd be surprised what you could do just validating things, setting up a plan, and then following that plan. So spend a day, find your keywords or what you think your keywords are, and then do some searches and validate off of that. And if you find that, man, I really felt like this particular phrasing was actually spot on for my business, but you're finding that that just isn't yielding proper results, then you know that you probably need to go back and either find another group of keywords or think of another way to describe your service. One thing that happens, kind of often in this atmosphere is we think we are phrasing things right, but the way people actually understand keywords or kind of how they search for things may not be exactly how we are. SEO is a good kind of framework for that, where for us, we would probably just say SEO, but for some people who are just getting into it, they may think Google. So they may say, rank, how do I rank better on Google? And they're not saying implicitly SEO, but that other keyword and that kind of other phrase is indicative of exactly what we're doing here. And so it's one of those things where you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes, validate with Google themselves and their search results, and then if you need to, refine it or move on with creating content and those pages out for yourself that can really support those keywords that you're targeting.
Awesome. I love that. And it could be just as simple as, doing a Google search for your own industry in your own city and see if your competitors are ranking or seeing what some of those keywords are out there and then starting to go from there. So thanks.
Yeah. And another tip, use your competitors. There's no reason not to. You're not going to get in any sort of trouble by looking at your competitors and seeing how they're doing it. If you are saying, man, there's just this big dog in my area and he's just killing it. He's got like 12 cars out there doing work. Dude, browse his website, look at it, and understand what he's doing. Absolutely. Wouldn't say still, but borrow. There's no reason that you can't borrow some ideas and, make them your own. So highly recommend that as well if you're either struggling where to begin or you are idolizing somebody and you want to potentially emulate them.
Awesome.
Oh, and I love talking about strategy. I love talking about you can do this for your specific company. I love one thing that you mentioned, Colton, where you're saying, don't force it, match that search intent with your keywords. To piggyback upon that, the next one that we have for number 4, we decided to go with implementation. So you can strategize, you can come up with a good plan, but you need to be able to implement that plan, right? I know that implementation kind of sounds nebulous, but it really encompasses all the actions like keyword research, tagging, meta descriptions, all the things that you've heard in SEO with URL structures and quality content strategies. But they're actionable changes you or your SEO specialist can implement on your site for a better search experience, because that's really what we're trying to do. Is you're matching that search intent with keywords, you're bringing them the users in, and then you're satisfying that with a good search experience on your website. That definitely helps with ranking within Google. I know that they've been quoted as far as what they're looking for is a good search experience, something that has good information that really satisfies whatever the query was, and wherever they land. So I want to briefly touch on some of these points. Like you mentioned, Colton, with the long tail keyword, you need to match that search intent. So when you're doing that keyword research, don't force it. We talked a lot about that. You also want to include those keywords in your content, whether that's a blog post, whether that's copy, whether that's in your headers or in your, it needs to appear organically. And then there's specific strategies surrounding local that we'll actually get in a little bit later. But what you want to do is you want to optimize your meta descriptions and your images. If you're on, and the way that you do that is it's very easy. If you're on a WordPress site, you can get a WordPress plugin, and then there you can kind of put in your meta descriptions. And essentially what that is, that's describing what you are as a company and what this page is supposed to be satisfying. So you're putting in that meta description. You're optimizing your images with alt text. What that means is that's essentially you're just describing what the image is for those that may be disabled or for crawlers that can't interpret an image. And so they're reading the text, and the text describes what that image is. And so if that matches up, say, for example, you're an e-commerce website, alt text, very important, because you have this product that you're showing, and you need to tell not only the user with the visual, but you need to tell the crawler, hey, that's what this product is. And so alt text can be very important to just important, depending on what type of site you are. You can also make sure that you have a comprehensive tagging plan. Like I mentioned, with the search experience on your site, if you're not tagging your posts or if you're not tagging your product pages, So when someone comes onto your site and is looking for a specific product and they type that in, maybe you have a search bar on your site or something, if you don't have a tagging plan in place, you're not going to pull up anything, and that search experience is then diminished on your site. So that's a little bit, it can be slightly laborious to do. I know that that's something that I've been working on with Boostability site, particularly, where I've gone through and wiped a bunch of tags and added a bunch of new ones, where I'm just trying to, like we've mentioned, put yourself in the shoes of someone who's searching through your site, so you can really maximize that search experience. You can also make sure that the URL structures are there to help your visitors. So when you're typing in, or you have different subfolders in your on your website, make sure that your URL structures make sense, that they're typically in words, that they're not just a bunch of numbers and gobbledygook. You want to make sure that it's something that's there to help your visitors. If it's a product page and you've got this product, make sure that it has the name in that URL structure. That can be very, very helpful. So people can share that and look through. Also, linking internally for that implementation. Make sure that you're you're linking internally so you can help a journey of a customer or the journey of a crawler on your site, so they can really identify, hey, I want people to get to this piece of content because it's my very best piece of content. And you can do that by linking internally. You have what's called a topic cluster, which we can talk about, and I think that we've talked about before, but it's essentially you have a pillar post and you have other posts that are pointing to that post, and that really shows Google, that shows the crawler that, hey, this pillar post is the most important. And you can have different conversion metrics on there, as far as different call to action buttons or different newsletter signups. And then create evergreen content. What evergreen means is it's good. It's going to be good in the past, it's going to be good now, and it's going to be good in the future. So it's not something that's terribly topical as far as this is going to age. And so when you're thinking of topics for your content, make sure that you're thinking of evergreen content. And then along the same lines, if you do have any outdated content, because it's hard to think of evergreen content all the time, make sure that you repurpose and update your current content. So you can add on, you can put two articles together. There's a lot of different things that you can implement to make that search experience better. And then make sure that your blog is mobile friendly and responsive. That can be very technical, it can be difficult, but again, if you're on a WordPress site, there's a lot of themes that that do this easily for you on your blog. And so doing all of these things and implementing the strategies that you've ideated and created can really turn your site into an exciting ranking machine and a very positive search experience, because that's really what we're going for, is a positive search experience.
Yeah, Mike, you just threw a lot of information. I mean, these are all awesome and all very important, but is there anyone that may be slightly more important or slightly more worthwhile than any of the others?
Like I mentioned, it depending on who you're targeting, who the user is, how they're using the site, how you want them to use the site, that you can have different levels of import. Like I said, with the alt text, it could be very important if you're an e-commerce business and you're describing your product images. And so I would lump a lot of these as, you just need to do this. Like, this is basic SEO. It's something that you should be optimizing for. But definitely, like we've mentioned, matching that search intent, it can't be understated. So I would maybe put that one above, where you're doing that legwork for the organic leads, for the organic traffic, where that one would probably be the best, because you're finding those, you're strategizing, and then you're implementing that within your content. So those first two, I think that's why I put them there, are definitely the most important, I would gauge.
Let me add on there. I'll go a little bit of a different route for what I would actually recommend as kind of being the number one. And I would actually say the mobile responsiveness and kind of layout there. We all kind of get in the weeds. I mean, Boostability ourselves, we do as well, with, looking at things on a huge screen, and we kind of lose sight how it actually looks in mobile. With kind of the advancement of CMSs automatically doing this for us, it's kind of the afterthought. But realistically, that's how Google is judging things now. So, see this all the time in reviewing sites that may not be doing well, is that if on a desktop everything looks great, content's high, pictures are there, they're gorgeous, but then all of a sudden you switch over to mobile and you see that, hey, your picture is actually taking up, the next 4 scrolls with a thumb. You're while your content is mobile friendly, you're actually not making it very kind of appealing for a search engine to recommend you, because that text, that thing that you are seeing great on a desktop, is actually at the bottom. And so Google may see that and go, well, there's 4 other, Yahoos over here that are actually providing this content above that fold. And so because of that, we're going to recommend them first. And so I would say intent is definitely great, but if the content isn't oriented right on a mobile device, first off, users are going to have a bad experience. But then second off, search engines are not going to see it as valuable, despite what you may be looking at and seeing. And so I would say that's a cautionary, make sure that you're always looking mobile, even if that's not the majority of your users today. I can tell you right now, 3 to 5 years from now, it'll be the opposite. People won't be looking for desktop, at least not the ones buying. It's going to be people on mobile doing their search in real time, or I've got to make a call today. That's going to be the future. So prepare for that. If you haven't looked at your site in mobile ever, or even just in a few months, double check how that site actually works. One tip that I like to give is, imagine you're giving this to like your grandma and have her do a task there. How do you find my phone number? How do you find a service? Give it to her, hand her a mobile device, and watch her go through it. And if she struggles at all, those are opportunities, as Mike has kind of alluded to improve that user experience. Maybe create a link, maybe create a better funnel. Anyways, so mobile first is where I would personally prioritize things when it comes to this list.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. These are all great, but let's move on to number 3 in our countdown.
Jumped ahead with speaking, but number 3 here, it really boils down to links. You got to have authority. We're in the environment nowadays and kind of in the landscape of search that, what you could have the greatest content, you could have the greatest page in the world, but if it doesn't have any sort of authority driven to it, it may not matter. And obviously, depending on where you are in the world, that could be a lot of work that's needed, link building wise and authority wise. Or it could be very simple, right? If you're kind of in the middle of nowhere, you're not competing with a whole lot of people, one link could be the difference between page 10 and page 100. But specifically from our standpoint, in order to get links, it's not always the best idea to go out there and just buy links and buy 1,000 links off of, Fiverr. Instead, frame your content. You're already going to be working on your content, so frame your content in a way that it can be shareable. Just to kind of work down the list here, the first one is, remember that helpful things, tutorials, tips, tricks, processes, those are all things that people want. Those are things that people tend to consume. And those are also things that people tend to link to. If they're on a blog and they say, you know what, I had trouble, but I actually followed this and it was like spot on, it's exactly what I needed. The likelihood of you actually attracting those natural links, those editorial links that Google is touting and recommending that everybody gets for the longevity of their SEO, that's where you're gonna be. So in almost every industry, you can create something helpful. Again, it can be a process, a tip. It could be going through an entire tutorial on something. Always be thinking of how you could potentially teach somebody about something in your industry and use that to create content and obviously get some, hopefully get some links off of that. Another one could be telling your story, telling your service, telling what you do in a little bit different of a way. We see this a lot more with kind of web apps, different things like that, progressive web apps, where we're now no longer kind of stuck in this motif of a page with text and that's about it. Maybe a video if you're kind of spicy. It's kind of moving in the way now where things are interactive. If you click on a button, it actually expands things. Maybe it opens up a new page. Maybe it opens up something else within the page. We've all seen this, hopefully, where you have kind of infinite scroll now, where if you just keep scrolling, it just keeps generating content and copy. And so kind of getting out there and finding a new way to tell your content and tell your story is a big need, and something that could actually help you stand out from the crowd. Again, if you're kind of in a more competitive area, maybe instead of trying to outmatch your content or your clients by writing 1,000 extra words, Instead, maybe you add a few more pictures in there. Maybe you add a slideshow in there. Maybe you actually add and create a tool there to help your users actually interact with your content. It's going to help increase dwell time. It's going to help increase potential brand familiarity. There's a lot of benefits that you potentially come from that. And again, you're not doing anything extra. You're just kind of working with what you're doing already. You're just formatting it a little bit different. Another one, this is not anything new by any means, but interview people. Interview people either within your space or maybe even people that are just interesting. One thing that we'll get into a little bit more, but it doesn't always have to be dedicated to your space. But if you are in a space that has a lot of experts or has a lot of opinions out there, interview people. You'd be surprised how many people are looking for a particular name or a particular person in relation to that. And so if you have kind of interviews out there, or even just kind of a video talking about maybe one of their concepts, theories, whatever it might be, you can actually pull traffic from their name, and obviously, in the grand scheme of things, hopefully get some links out there. It could be a link from them. It could be a link from a company that they're associated with. There's a lot of other things that you could potentially get just by, again, creating content for yourself and specifically interviewing people. Another one is data write-ups. So this could be, trudging through data that is already there. A lot of people do this, with kind of national data sets, things like population, crime statistics, things like that, that are already actually recorded and tracked out there. But you could potentially do this for your own industry. Maybe there's some data set out there that is just really boring and it's really huge and maybe it's never been cleaned. If you spend a few days going through that and creating something interesting, maybe putting it out there in kind of like an infographic or something like that, you can now potentially get tons of links. One strategy that I heard on this a few years ago was security company. They kind of went through kind of national crime statistics and they just put out a top 10 list of top 10 cities that you may want to live in, if you're trying to avoid crime. And on the flip side, here's the top 10 places that if you are living in, you probably really want to consider kind of beefing up your security and having something, kind of protecting you there. And that got them national coverage, that got them news stations linking, that got them articles. And again, they inherently just created it to create copy with the hope of getting links, and it worked. So try to apply that in your industry, kind of where you are. And then this one is really up to kind of your content and you as a person and kind of running this, but controversy is another one. If you really just are okay to kind of have either a fight or a discussion online, you could potentially put something out there controversial. And it could even be kind of a false controversy, right? Like, I don't agree with this, but I kind of do. Just potentially having that content out there, again, can net you some links, can net you some views. You got to have a little bit stronger of a stomach and kind of be aware of some repercussions there. But there are entire business models kind of based off of that. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but it is something that, you've probably seen in your own life, right? Why would you do this? Why wouldn't you do that? And so that's also another kind of quick way that you could potentially create content to, yield some links.
Yeah, there's that phrase that there's no such thing as bad PR, but at the same time, you want to judge either what your industry is or what your business is and how much you want to be out there. But sometimes just throwing out something that gets people talking can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, and one thing that I'll say that kind of aligns with that, reviews are probably the most predominant way that somebody may see this controversy, so to speak. And we've all seen those, right, where somebody actually does like a really funny reply or just kind of a really kind of backhanded reply to somebody. In some cases that's good, some cases it's not, but at the end of the day, it's controversy. And again, if you've seen that for a business, there's a really good chance that they netted a bunch of links and a lot of authority off of that. Mm-hmm. Kind of what you want to do. The last thing, just kind of going off of this, is again kind of how you format that content. Make sure it's easy to read, make sure people can actually engage with it. Again, if you're creating this kind of long evergreen content, something that's maybe more factual, you need a way to share that and try to make that easy for your audience to potentially do that. Provide them a link right there in the text. Maybe provide them a widget. There's all sorts of different things that you could do. And then, of course, make it easy to navigate. If you're trying to get people to dive deeper within your page, tell them to dive deeper within your page. Link to it inside of your content. Just you saying something inside of an article doesn't mean that somebody's going to go find a reference or an article on your site. But if you link that, all of a sudden they can say, oh, I'm actually interested in that. Personally, I do this all the time doing research. You read a case study and then they're referencing like 6 other people who are talking about something. I will straight up just open like 12 tabs and then I will just read through that. Sometimes it takes an hour, sometimes it's more. But at the end of the day, it got me to actually dive deeper into some of those other topics, subjects, or even other pages within their website.
Awesome.
So with that, I'll kick it over to Mike.
Well, actually, I'm going to interrupt here, both of you. Yep, we've just gone through all these ranking factors, all this great stuff. So I'm going to throw a couple, kind of a curveball at you. We're going to go through a lightning round here. This is something we get on search sessions a lot, and even through some of our channels, a lot of our customers are saying they service a very specific industry, a very specific niche. They maybe don't think anyone would find their content interesting, or their industry interesting enough to read about. That's fun to say. So I want to go through a couple verticals that some may consider not as exciting. I'm not going to say boring, but not as exciting, and talk about some ideas for them. And even though these are specific, I think this can be applied to a lot of different business types. So remember, this is a lightning round, guys. We're going to go through this quick, but let's just knock through them all. So first up, we have a locksmith.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I'll just kind of throw one out here. Do lock reviews. I mean, it sounds a little bit corny, but literally, if you are going to the store and you see 2 or 3 locks for sale, buy them and do a review on them. Try to hack them, right? Try to kind of break through. One example that I can specifically give for this, if you're on YouTube and you're kind of bored or whatever it might be, look for the lock picking attorney. It's the weirdest content as far as me recommending it, but you'll be surprised how long you'll actually stay on that channel just watching this guy like open locks in 2 seconds that you're like, damn, how did you do that? So,
I was going to mention that too. I was like, lock picking attorney. I've also seen lock picking lawyer, where it's those kind of reviews. You could also do what you need to be a locksmith, like different tools and equipment to be a locksmith, because it's something that maybe if you're a locksmith, it's your day-to-day, but it's not something that other people necessarily know about.
Awesome. Or even a video of like what happens if you get locked out of your house. Here's how you jump in, or how to pick your own lock, kind of a thing. But cool. Next up, Instacare.
What I'm thinking of for this one, or what I came up with, was essentially what does a trip to Instacare look like? What to expect? Kind of when you go to an Instacare versus when you go to an ER. Like there's a lot of maybe fear around that. I know that some people go to Instacare frequently and they really like doing that. Well, I mean, I don't imagine they'd like to do that, but they feel more comfortable doing that. And it's really creating content around making that more comfortable or more knowable. And so it would be like, okay, is there a telemedicine option for your Instacare visit? So you'd write about that if you're an Instacare, or different things. So that's kind of my thought process there as far as creating content goes.
One thing that I'll add to that, just a little bit different, is just because you're in the medical field doesn't mean that, again, kind of referring back to that data mining and data kind of publishing, there doesn't mean that you can't release something. My initial thought here was, you'd be surprised, and it's pretty interesting data, especially for like a local news station. If you were to release like, here's the top 5 ways that we're seeing people in our office. It could be flu, it could be broken arms, it could be, right? There could be maybe some interesting patterns there. One thing could be whiplash. Maybe you're seeing just in our area, there are just poor drivers. And so for whatever reason, we're seeing that a lot. Again, be careful with HIPAA stuff. You don't have to release any names or anything, but just generalities there. Even within kind of, flu-like symptoms, what are you seeing there? We're seeing a lot of runny nose. So, if you're seeing these 5 things, these are the top 5 things that we're seeing when it's coming to allergies this season. So if you're seeing this, there's a real good chance it's allergies. COVID scares, this is a good potential opportunity to release something that's interesting, plays into the environment that we're in today, and could potentially net you some of those links as well.
Awesome. Next up, personal injury lawyer.
For this one, I'm thinking you could define each type of injury that your firm will accept as a case. Along with different scenarios in which such an injury could be sustained on its own dedicated like evergreen page, and then different relevant types of evidence potentially for each potential case. It can be kind of difficult because as a lawyer, you're very busy, and so it's hard to write for your own blog, and it can be you get caught in the weeds, right? Because well, it depends on a lot of different instances with injury or different things. So really kind of spelling that out and being like, this is what I see most commonly. As a lawyer, that could be some direction that you go as a personal injury lawyer.
One recommendation that I have on this one, hopefully, if you're kind of reputable or even bigger, right, so you don't have the time, use your interns, use your kind of paralegals, maybe give them a case that's already happened. Could be yours, it could be somebody else's. See how they would have handled that differently. Could they have gotten more money? Were they a little bit too greedy, right? Were there different things that you would have handled differently? Obviously, it's going to set you apart as far as kind of explaining your expertise, explaining your process, maybe even showing how you would be more aggressive, right? And just kind of putting that out there. But then again, it's great content. So it's content that, like Mike's saying, you could put within specific kind of injury pages. And it's content that is not necessarily generated off of you. Like I said, you could review just general cases that are, publicly being put out there. Or you could use your own cases and say, this is how we went through it. This was our thought process. And that's going to help people, learn more about you, but also create some interesting content.
Awesome. Just because it's a lightning round, I want to keep this moving. So Mike, you take this one. Colton, you grab the next one. So we've got an asphalt paving company.
Okay. For this one, you could describe in details the tools that you need for the job. So I know that when you're driving along on the road, you see a bunch of people either standing around or paving, and you could really describe that. It could be something that I know a lot of people are interested in the things that they see, and so they just want to be able to understand them more fully. And so it could be, I'm describing all these tools that I needed for a job, and I'm illustrating all of them. Should construction crews be allowed to pave in the rain, as an example? You see a lot of them standing around. Why don't they pave in the rain? So just think of those kinds of questions, and I think answering them quickly with content could be something that could be interesting for users to view.
Awesome. Next up, Colton, we have sedation dentist.
Sedation dentistry, for me, I immediately go to kind of like dental phobia. So there's a reason why you want to be put out before you're getting some dental work done. So I'd say addressing some of that, maybe some meditation techniques, maybe some ways to kind of prepare for your visit. I think piggybacking off of something that Mike said earlier with Instacare, maybe you need to outline when sedation dentistry is kind of needed and when it may not be, or maybe reasons why you should come in and probably get that looked at, even if you're kind of fearful. But like I said, dental phobia, that's where my mind goes. Try to address that, try to be thoughtful of that, and maybe even offer some kind of aftercare, like, hey, we'll follow up with you just to make sure that you had a good experience and that you actually feel good about your visit so that maybe you'll come back.
Great. Next up, home service repair. In Kansas City, for example, you can do this in any city, but Mike.
Mm-hmm. I think that kind of to go off what Colton said before, you could do this for a home service repair where you're describing in detail the types of repairs that you see most often and maybe what a person could do to avoid those types of repairs. I know that seems semi-counterintuitive, but if you're creating that educational content as far as home service, you could say, this is the Freon that I use for the HVAC or what, and this is what it does, and you go into detail. There's a lot of different avenues that you could go with home service repair, and it just really talk about those most common types of repairs and then get into the details as an expert.
Sweet. Colton, personal real estate agent.
Yeah, so this one, I've said it before, but I never see it used. So I'm going to keep saying it until I start seeing it a lot in, underperforming checks. But essentially, creating a video of you actually walking through a property. I see this actually with high-end homes that are $1 million plus. See this all the time, right? They've hired a professional crew. They come out, walk through it. But if you are scheduling time to go with a couple or maybe even just somebody buying a house, take the time. Just go through it. Either after, before, you're already there. You're already opening the property. But go through. Create a video. Put it on your website. You can transcribe it if you want to get a little bit more words and kind of text on your page. And if you're kind of out there and you're like, hey, I don't know how to generate leads, or I have some free time and I want to make some improvements, go visit a few properties. Again, if you kind of have a high-priced property in mind that you're like, that would net me some really good commission, do some extra legwork. Go to the property, visit it, create a walkthrough video, maybe show some specifics of the property. Even if they don't want to walk through that property, if you go through that detail, there's a good chance that somebody may side with you just because you know what you're looking for and you know what you're doing.
Awesome. Roofing and restoration, Mike.
For this one, I like pictures and videos as well, where you're doing a before and after. Think of power washing. Think of, oh, this is a bad roof. This is when to know when you need this restoration. Or if you're doing like a fire restoration or different things, you just take a picture beforehand and you say, wow, this is all damage, smoke damage everywhere. This is what it looks like after. So you're highlighting those jobs that you're proud of, the unique projects, maybe new safety initiatives, and really get into those, again, the details where you're really illustrating those different tools, the different things that you use, because that can be interesting for the user and it can really show your expertise.
Great. And last one, Colton, lawn care and landscaping.
Local grass tips. Done. Enough said. But realistically here, like give tips for your area. All the time people are just going to say, oh, it's just grass, it's the same. But I can assure you, if you're in kind of Louisiana, the swampish area, the way you're going to care for grass there is going to be very different from how you take care of it here, where it's kind of more deserty and dry, which is going to be vastly different from if you're in New York, right? You may have different grass types. Like, I actually didn't know that was a thing, but it is a thing. There are different grass types. And if you're trying to encourage one type of grass over another to grow, it actually needs different conditions. Just one quick example here is in Texas, I know for a fact crabgrass, or what we call crabgrass, is a thing. That's why grass there typically sucks. And it's because the soil there sucks. So if you want to actually get some good grass, or what we call bluegrass, or that's kind of the most preferred one, you actually have to put down fertilizer. You have to actually redo the soil for your area to put that down. Again, I didn't know that. Underperforming, you come across these things. So grass tips.
These have been great. And we also got a bunch of questions, people asking for their kind of specific industry. I know we didn't include them here in this, but we'll reach out to them separately. And also recognizing that we're coming up to the top of the hour, but we have a lot of good stuff left. So stick around. We'll get to the number one factor to rank on Google here in just a second. But Mike, number two, do you want to take this one real quick?
I will take it real quick. Like you mentioned, we got a lot of questions. We want to get to those questions, so we will go through this. Okay, the number two factor that will help your website and business get ranked on Google is local optimization. What this encompasses is things like targeting local packs, citation building, and claiming your Google My Business profile, as I've listed here. By doing this, you have more control of your brand and really work with the search engine to find local traffic. We've talked about local SEO before on other search sessions and before on our blog. So some of you may remember when trying to rank locally, you need to take into account the proximity, the relevance, and the prominence. Essentially, how close your business is to the searcher, how relevant the search query is for your products and your services to that searcher, and then what do other consumers say about your product and services. And you can do that all through Google My Business. You can also do that on your site with your content, because all of these items have their own potential to get you high quality local traffic in your area. But remember, you have to optimize your site for local SEO with your main tool in your content. So keep that in mind when you're creating pages and content that illustrates what you do and who you are as a business. On the next slide, we actually go into a little bit of the application. So I found this site. It's a plumber here in Utah, and they do an excellent job with their local SEO. It's really, as you can see here, where it says plumbing repairs in Utah, this is one of their service pages. It's a very high landing page. They have geo keywords where they're including that location, like we mentioned with Kansas City, and in this case, it's Utah. It's very prominent on their main landing page, and it illustrates on the same page the services. So if you're thinking of it from a crawler standpoint, they recognize that your plumbing repairs, you're in Utah, and then you also provide all of these services. So it's something that you're illustrating with the copy, what you do, who you are, why you're doing it, and you're really doing that with all of this in place. Colton's going to go through a few more wins that this website has here on the next two slides.
Yeah. And just kind of hitting on specific strategies. I know when it comes to local, obviously we got to create good content there, but there are a few kind of, going back to that strategy notion, there are a few kind of strategies that you want to keep in mind, just as you're jumping into the content here. First off, if you're targeting kind of a specific area, or if you're in a really kind of competitive area, focus on your service pages first. Talk about what you actually do, go in detail, mention the areas that you serve, and that's going to be kind of the best, bang for your buck when it comes to spending time here. The other one, which we'll kind of get into on the next page, is essentially if you're looking for a lot of areas or kind of an expanded area of service, this is where I would actually recommend go with location pages first and then get into the services that you offer at each area. Again, typically if you're servicing like 40 different areas, there's a good chance that what you actually offer is going to vary slightly. So that's going to help you create unique content for those pages. It's also going to help users actually understand what you either offer or don't offer in an area. And again, kind of grows your content in a way that's natural, right? If you're looking to add more cities, you hopefully have a template you can kind of work through that. If you're going for anything kind of past 4 or 5+ cities, go with locations first. So obviously from there, you want to just create good content that talks about your services, specifically what you do. This is where processes are fantastic. This is where citing your experience, showing your experience with kind of before and after, all fantastic ways of showing that you are an expert, you do this every day, and that you actually know what you're doing.
Oh,
This
you're
is
muted.
great. Everyone stuck with us throughout this whole thing. I've been waiting for this number one factor. We're going to reveal it here in just a second, but we also want to give you 2 quick case studies that really demonstrate this number one factor really well. Just prolonging it just slightly. Mike, you want to take this?
No worries. We wanted to highlight this great win from a traditionally boring vertical. Here is the Allstate blog. They deal with insurance. I'm sure we all know Allstate. They're a big dog, so they have a lot of different resources, but they do things that I think that we can translate into just regular business folk, right? We all know how exciting insurance is, but what they've done here really is exciting from a content standpoint. They've included query-based content strategies with how-tos and FAQ focused and different questions. So if you're going through here, the example that we have right here is it's an interview where they've done, this is something that this person has done. It's very interesting. It's interactive. And if you actually go through this blog post, it has videos, it has embedded tweets, it has even a carousel of the images at the bottom. It has all those things that we've been talking about. And it's a great example of entertaining educational information. That's an absolute win. I think it's something that I ended up going through the blog a little bit more, and I was just like, wow, this is actually interesting. I know it's insurance, but it's entertaining, educational, and it really, I think it helps get people staying on this blog and really reading into this. And now Colton's going to show us something a little bit closer to home.
Yeah, so this is actually one of our clients here. So this is actually asphalt paving. They've done a fantastic job. They created location pages because they wanted to cover a broad area. And specifically within those pages, they've talked about, how they do what they do. They've talked about their process. They talk about kind of the different things, but from, laying the asphalt to actually how they pave it. A little bit of repair help as well. But in general, they've done a fantastic job in creating that location-based content or pages first, and then really diving into their service and going kind of in depth with, here's who we are, here's what we do, and specifically for your area, here's something special, here's something unique. So yeah, again, if you're kind of local, you're not sure exactly how you should frame your pages, check them out. It's a fantastic website. Obviously learn something from them and apply it to yourself.
Great. So now that we've kept everyone in suspense long enough, let's all do this all at once. The number one factor
Is
to rank on Google is
content.
Content. So if you hadn't guessed what we've been talking about this entire time by now, all these factors go into having good content on your website, which is the ultimate number one ranking factor for Google.
It's something that we've seen. Content is king. It's still king, and it's probably going to be king for a long time coming, because it's content that's done correctly with the algorithms from Google that are getting smarter and smarter with different AI learning. We just make sure that we need to adapt our content for those wins as well. It's something we need to evolve with the algorithms, but the content is still there. And we just need to make sure that we're satisfying that search intent and make sure that you're doing your best with proper keywords, with proper intent, with your target audience. Like we've mentioned throughout, that you're matching that, you're not forcing it. You have those high intent keywords where you're bringing in qualified traffic to your site that will convert into organic leads. That's something that we did here at Boostability. We went through, we said, okay, what are these high intent keywords? What are we targeting? Who are we reaching out to? And then we really narrowed that down for us. So we took into account that intent and that search intent. Okay, what do they want to learn more? Do they want a newsletter sign up? Do they want these different things? And we're trying to satisfy that in the best way possible. And that's something that every business should be looking to do for their target audience and for all of those things. So good content. Content is still king. Finish us off here, Colton.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said, content is king. Content has always been the base, right? And you can't get anywhere. I like to think of it like content is the car. Links, authority, user data, all that is either the AC inside the car or it's the gas that's helping you get there. But if you don't have a car, you don't have a car. So start with content. We've already cited it before, but evergreen content, specifically something that is factual. Make sure you're putting that content out there. Obviously, if you have your own services, the factuality there is you actually describing how you do it or how you've seen it done, right? What's the best way to actually do it? If you're creating a blog post, you better be citing people and citing good, accurate, current information. You'd be surprised how often people are actually citing things from like 2007. It's ridiculous. So make sure you're creating that good evergreen content and make sure it's factual. Obviously, content length is a big one. How long does it need to be? Do I need to create a novel within my page? No, you don't. Some querying that we've done and just kind of testing, we've actually come up with 900 words is about the average for a page. Now that varies from industry. Some are much lower than that. Some are much higher. So an example here would be, a lawyer, you're probably looking more about that 2,000-ish word side of things. But if you're actually looking at something like e-commerce, you're probably looking more around 200 words. So it does vary. 900 is the average, but at the end of the day, you have to have some sort of substantial content on the page. Putting a picture up there with one single line of text, it hasn't worked for a long time. It's not going to work now. Stop doing it. Start investing in content. And then at the end of the day, kind of the new buzzword, if you will, is this EAT or EAT from Google. What it ultimately boils down to is becoming synonymous or kind of in line with your industry and kind of becoming an expert there. So for example here, if you're Visa, if I say that word, you automatically associate credit cards, maybe some finance, right? Banking. Those are all things that Visa themselves has created a brand around. They've become synonymous with that. Obviously, they create tons of content around it, but you have to do the same for your area, for your industry. If you want to become synonymous and you want kind of the EAT algorithm or kind of side of things to help you, become synonymous. Become whatever you're trying to put out there. Again, landscaping as the example here. If you're trying to be the best landscaper, you better have those tips. You better have a lot of information about it. And you better have it so that no matter what you're putting out there, it's all synonymous with you as a landscaper in that industry.
Awesome. Guys, this has been great. And we also have a whole bunch of resources on our website. This is on boostability.com/search-sessions. So you can look up all these resources. We'll have them available if you want to go a little bit more in depth into what we've been saying. So thank you, Mike and Colton. This has been fantastic. We also have a ton of questions. I realize we've gone over the hour, but stick with us. If we don't get to your question, I won't go through all of them because we have a lot. We will make sure to reach out to you individually. And we also want to say that we will make this available on YouTube and on our website, and we will send it out in an email to all who registered here in the coming days. So you'll be able to watch this again or go over a couple parts if you have additional questions. So with that, guys, I'm going to start with one that is, do I really need to blog? I mean, that's come up a lot here. If you're short on time or resources, is blogging really necessary? And if so, how often should I do it?
Mike, you want to take a stab first?
Yeah, let me take a stab. While blogging isn't, I wouldn't deem it as absolutely necessary. If you have enough pages that describe what you do, how you do it, so you could kind of combine your blogging into service pages. So there's different types of content, right, on your website. You've got the copy, you've got content. You can build out and have really good quality service pages, product pages, and different things. So you can kind of turn that almost into your blog, where you're doing an FAQ for each one of these products. You're doing an FAQ for each of these services, where each of these pages kind of turns into a blog. So yeah, traditional blogging might not make sense, but you're essentially doing that with your different subpages and subfolders. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have a subfolder of blog, but you could turn these other pages into. So yes and no, I guess is kind of the answer, where if you're creating the content and it's really satisfying that search intent, then you could count that as a win. If you want to increase your reach, though, then you would have a blog and you'd be like, okay, I want to go out and I want to talk about this specific thing and I want to answer this question. And so it would definitely be beneficial to have a blog in that instance. So it's not necessary, but it's helpful. So yes and no, with you probably should, but if you don't want to, you can get away with service pages, product pages that are very fleshed out with lots of content that's good on there. Would you agree, Colton?
Yeah, I mean, agree with almost everything there. The only thing that I would kind of structure around that is, if you're just getting started, don't worry about blogging. Create out your website, right? Create those service or location pages, or even product pages, right? E-commerce is one that I can't discredit here. Make sure you're just building out those pages to be robust. Past that, yes, blogging becomes kind of a need or a thing. I would say frequency-wise, minimum once a month. If you can swing it, hopefully every week. I like to try to put this in kind of year perspective. If you're doing it once a month, that's 12 pages. It's not a ton, but it's not terrible, right? It's a good amount. So if you're at that kind of end stage of your business where you've been around for a few years, absolutely should be blogging. Hopefully those pages are already fleshed out. If you're just getting started, don't worry about blogging. You've got a few years before you probably need to worry about that.
Great. Okay, another question that we got several that came in, so I'm going to kind of combine them into one, is surrounding our number 2 point about local optimization. So say you're an e-commerce business that's serving nationwide, or you're maybe you're not trying to target your local area because you're in a small town. You're trying to go a little bit bigger. Question one, is having Google My Business still important? And two, how do you kind of build out that content if you're maybe not trying to do local optimization?
So I'll take a stab at this one. E-commerce, it depends, right? There's a lot of ifs with that kind of notion. The first one is, if you're just a drop shipper, right? You're just buying it from China or somewhere and then you're shipping it somewhere else, so you never have physical inventory, then you can probably forego the GMB. There's really no need there. Focus online only and take it from there. However, if you are storing kind of product, or you have that availability locally, or let's say that you're manufacturing, so you're the one creating it as well as storing it and then selling it, absolutely. There's no reason not to, outside of, hey, I probably don't want somebody coming to my address. But even with that being the case, I think of like Craigslist, things like that, where you could potentially put your content or your inventory out there. You could potentially get some people in, and even with the GMB, you don't necessarily have to disclose your address. So there is the opportunity to still get some local sales on top of everything else. But again, if you're just strictly, I don't have any sort of inventory, I don't actually sell what I have locally, I don't have it, then no, forego the GMB, focus on other things, focus on blogging. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that definitely the strategy with a GMB, if you're doing that, can be slightly different. Like you said, you don't have to forego, or you don't have to disclose your physical address. You can also include that you're in the description for your GMB that you're a national company. You can really describe your business and what you provide, so people will be able to answer those questions, and that searchers will be able to really have that satisfied. Be like, oh, I know that this company is here, but what do they do? You can just go read on their GMB and you don't necessarily need to go there. So it would also work from a crawler standpoint, where you'd be identified as an entity, and then it would be like, oh, okay, I'm reading this description. it's a national entity. So yeah, I like what you said there, Colton.
One thing I would tack on with that, and this just kind of comes down to user behavior. I know I do this myself with buying things online, and again, e-commerce. Having some sort of address, even if it's just a PO box, so again, maybe not GMB, but just having that local presence or kind of connotation that I do have something physical, it can actually go a long way to actually establishing, hey, you know, I am actually real. I'm taking some sort of stake here that I exist, and that I'm just not fly by night, right? It can have a lot of impact on kind of validating that you are an actual business, that you are legitimate. So I would even caution, if you are strictly online, you still got to try to provide something. Some personal story on this one. I have my own e-commerce stores. Same thing. The minute I put on a PO box or someplace that somebody could potentially, you know, mail their product to if they were dissatisfied with it, started seeing orders like I'd never seen orders before. And I think, at least in my mind, it's probably because, oh, hey, if I don't like this product, I can actually send it back. Have I had a lot of problem with that? No, not by any means. But it does instill that confidence of, if I have a problem, I can always come back to you because you're physically located somewhere.
Great ideas. Okay, I'm going to go through 2 more questions and then we'll wrap this up. The first one was, we got a lot of requests back when we were talking about keywords at number 5, was what were those keyword tools that you mentioned?
Sure. So your mind, first off, number 1, just to give you some additional keyword tools or just tools that help with keywords, there is one called Uber Suggest. So that's a great one. You can put it in, it'll spit out a bunch of keywords. Neil Patel, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe Neil Patel, they're another advertising agency. I believe they're the ones that actually bought that and they run that now. So you may need to search like Neil Patel keyword tool, something like that. Uber Suggest is what it was originally called, though. That one I believe is free. Another one is Google AdWords, specifically their keyword planner. That's a fantastic one. Just to cite a few more, you have SEMrush, Ahrefs. We'll put this out in the blog, or sorry, in the post as well, so you can have links and you're not trying to like remember this. But those are 2 additional tools. Another one is Moz. Moz has their own kind of keyword tool. So if you're already, you know, buying a Moz subscription, go there, use their keyword tool. It's pretty good. And then the last one that I'll just kind of suggest here off the top of my head, keyword wise, is going to be actually Search Console, Google Search Console. So if you're not sure, maybe you've had a website for the last 6 months and you just are actually not sure how people are finding you, go there. Google actually tells you specific keywords as to how people are finding you. And it's a great way to either validate who is coming to you, how are they finding you, or maybe some opportunities that you're like, I actually don't mention this service, but for some reason I'm getting a lot of search for it. So maybe I need to go and create a page.
Great. Okay, that'll be helpful. And yeah, we will link it in our blog that we post later this week. And last question that I want to ask is, because Google changes its algorithm fairly frequently, someone asked, how do we know that these strategies, that our SEO strategies are working because that algorithm is changing?
I can take this. With Google, like Google is updating constantly, as it sounds like the individual already knows. Like they're constantly updating and improving their algorithm, but the main factors as far as content, as far as quality content and different local optimization, implementation strategy, it's something that is constantly evolving. It's something that we're constantly looking at. And we look at results, right? Here at Boostability, we have thousands of clients. And so it's something that we're looking at, okay, did a shift happen? Did Google announce it? Is it something? And so we're looking at all that data and we're making tweaks all the time. So it's something that, yes, it's very difficult to stay on top of, but it's something that in the SEO industry, and if you're familiar with it, you're almost always passionate. And that's why I love the industry so much, just because you find people either on Twitter or at different companies where they're all following their own data set and they're doing what either Google's told them to do or what they see their data saying that, hey, this works, we're getting more traffic, we're getting more XYZ, like we're getting more of these factors, and this is the change that we've made. And so it's really keeping track of that, what you've changed, seeing the change, and then continuing on forward. There's a lot of great advice that we can give, but it's a constant battle. It's something that we're always trying to do, but the main points stay the same.
Yeah, just to tack on a little bit onto that is, I wouldn't fear algorithms, not by any means. Obviously, there's always going to be some kind of shift or change. Probably the most noticeable change as of recent has been probably the BERT algorithm update. Across the board, a lot of people saw a lot of keywords disappear from their rankings, but one familiar trend that I've kind of seen out of these updates is even if you lose a lot of keywords, the amount of impressions, the amount of people you still have coming to your site may grow despite you actually losing keywords. And in those instances, there's a real good chance that you were kind of overgrowth. You were appearing for keywords that you probably shouldn't have appeared for. So dialing in that intent is super key on that. Again, if you're focusing on the wrong things and just trying to put yourself in places that you probably shouldn't be, then you're probably going to have a lot of repercussion from algorithm updates. However, if you're just creating good content, building your business online, and just focusing on yourself and just putting out good information, 9 times out of 10, you're always going to be rewarded. And even if it looks like, hey, I'm receiving something bad off this, usually there's some sort of roundabout benefit that you may not be aware of, such as increased exposure, more people actually finding you and wanting to stay on your website, different things like that, where innately you may see some keyword rank loss, but if you see other things grow, those are going to help ranks over time.
Great. Thanks, guys. And like I mentioned, we have a ton of questions that we haven't gotten to. I'll make sure that I'm keeping track of all of these. I'll make sure that we get them answered offline after the show. So once again, thank you, Mike and Colton. This has been so helpful. We're so lucky to have you guys, as always. And then we want you to turn in next time. That's coming up in 2 weeks on September 16th, where we'll be talking about the top 2 sales techniques that every business owner needs to know. And that's taking your prospects from seeds to sales. And we'll be featuring our own VP of Partners, Matt Tennyson, and Matt Sawzel, our Director of Sales. These two are whizzes in the sales industry, so you won't want to miss this talk. And at the end of September, on the 30th, Google is back. We'll talk with Clayton Hunter from Google Ads about connecting your paid and organic strategies. So don't miss either of these amazing shows, and you can register for them now on boostability.com/search-sessions. And as always, if you need help with your SEO, if you need help implementing any of these strategies that we've talked about today, you could reach out to us here at Boostability on our website, or you can give us a call. Our phone number is there on the screen. And then once again, you can RSVP to the next show or watch this one again. We will make it available later this afternoon. So thanks again, you guys. And thanks all for joining. We'll talk to you next time.